Hello and welcome to IAMC Radio and Podcast. Today is February 4th and we're bringing you the top news headlines. So buckle up because we've got a wild ride through Nigerian politics, international trade wars, and even a surprise development involving President Trump in Africa. To help us untangle it all, we have our expert with us today, who as always can see the forest for the trees.
It's a pleasure to be here. Let's jump into these complex stories.
Okay, first up, let's head over to Nigeria, where Sahara Reporters has uncovered some serious allegations of corruption within the ruling All Progressives Congress.
What's fascinating here is that it's not a major opposition party making these accusations, but a smaller group, the African Action Congress. They're claiming that another organization, the Forum of National Youth Leaders of all political parties in Nigeria, accepted a bribe of 30 million naira from the government to sway support towards the APC.
30 million naira might not sound like much on a global scale, but the AAC is really going all in on this. They're demanding a full investigation by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, that's Nigeria's main anti-corruption agency. And they're making a lot of noise about it. What do you think their game is here?
Well, their boldness suggests a couple of things. First, it speaks to a potential level of discontent and instability within the Nigerian political landscape. Smaller parties might be feeling increasingly marginalized and are willing to take a risk to challenge the status quo. Second, this accusation echoes earlier claims made by former Vice President Atiku Abubakar about the current government offering bribes to opposition parties. This consistency raises serious questions about the integrity of the political system as a whole.
And it looks like corruption might not just be limited to political maneuvering. Sahara Reporters also published a report from Budget Foundation that reveals some pretty shocking budget padding happening within the Nigerian National Assembly.
The numbers are pretty staggering. The Federal Cooperative College Oji River in Enugu State initially submitted a budget proposal for 12.8 billion naira, but somehow ended up with an approved budget of 103.6 billion naira. That's an increase of over 800%.
Whoa, that's a lot of extra zeros. Budget T highlighted some of the more questionable additions, like 500 million naira for motorcycles and tricycles for youth in certain states. That's a great initiative on the surface, but where's all that money actually going?
And this isn't an isolated case. Sahara Reporters uncovered similar padding in the budget for the Federal College of Fisheries and Marine Technology in Lagos. This consistent pattern suggests a troubling lack of transparency and accountability, raising concerns about possible misappropriation of funds within the National Assembly.
It really makes you wonder about the priorities of those in power, doesn't it? Okay, let's shift gears and look at what's happening on the international stage. It seems President Trump's trade war with Canada is heating up, as reported by both AFP and Vanguard.
President Trump has imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian imports, and Canada isn't taking it lying down. They've banned U.S. companies from bidding on government contracts and even canceled a deal with Elon Musk's Starlink to provide internet services in remote parts of Ontario.
It's amazing to see the ripple effects of this trade war, even down to liquor stores pulling U.S. products off their shelves. And you have to chuckle at the irony of Elon Musk, a close advisor to President Trump, getting caught in the crossfire.
This trade war highlights the interconnectedness of global economies and the unintended consequences of protectionist policies. But President Trump's actions go beyond trade disputes. He's also set his sights on South Africa, imposing sanctions over their land reform policy.
According to AFP, President Trump is claiming that South Africa is confiscating land from white people. The South African government, however, insists that this is simply a constitutional process for equitable land distribution.
This clash of narratives underscores the deep-seated historical and social complexity surrounding land ownership in South Africa. It's a very sensitive issue, and these sanctions could have a devastating impact on South Africa's economy, especially their HIV/AIDS program, which relies heavily on U.S. funding.
Now, for a development that might surprise you, President Trump has ordered his first airstrike in Africa, as reported by Premium Times.
The target was ISIS Somalia in the Golis Mountains. It's worth noting that this happened just 12 days into President Trump's second term and only a week after Pete Hegseth was sworn in as Secretary of Defense.
That timing is certainly interesting. What do you make of it?
It could suggest a potential shift towards a more aggressive approach to counterterrorism in Africa under the Trump administration. While AFRICOM, the U.S. military command responsible for Africa, has stated its commitment to minimizing civilian casualties, it remains to be seen how this will play out in practice.
That's a very important point. The potential consequences of increased military intervention in the region are significant.
Absolutely. And it raises even more questions about the long-term strategy and potential unforeseen ramifications.
Well, this has been quite a start to our news roundup. We've already covered corruption, budget padding, international tensions, and a potential shift in U.S. foreign policy. And we're just getting started.
It certainly paints a complex picture of the global landscape.
It does. And speaking of complex situations, Sahara Reporters brings us news about Nigeria's response to recent shifts in U.S. foreign aid policies. It seems the Nigerian government has approved a 4.5 billion naira budget for HIV treatment.
This is directly tied to the U.S. government's recent emergency humanitarian waiver, which reversed a funding pause on HIV treatment in developing countries. This pause was initially implemented under the Trump administration as part of a review of foreign aid.
So this funding from Nigeria is essentially stepping in to fill the gap left by that initial U.S. policy shift.
Precisely. And it underscores how reliant many countries are on international assistance, particularly for vital healthcare programs. This approved budget will allow Nigeria to purchase 150,000 HIV treatment packs over the next 4 months, ensuring those in need can continue to access critical medication.
That's a huge relief for those affected. It's a powerful example of how policy decisions made by global superpowers can have a direct impact on vulnerable populations around the world.
It certainly emphasizes the interconnectedness of global health and politics.
Now let's turn our attention back to some domestic issues in Nigeria. Sahara Reporters has a story about the return of Kachala Yarma, a notorious bandit kingpin.
This is a concerning development indeed. Yarma, who is imprisoned in Niger Republic for 9 years, has now returned to Katsina State in Nigeria. His return has sparked fears of renewed violence and instability in the region.
For those who might not be familiar with him, Yarma has a long history of leading violent attacks, kidnappings, and cattle rustling. His presence is a cause for serious concern.
Absolutely. His reappearance could potentially reignite conflicts among rival bandit groups and lead to a surge in attacks on vulnerable communities. Intelligence reports even suggest that other terrorist factions are wary of Yarma's reach, which speaks volumes about the potential severity of the situation.
It's a stark reminder of the ongoing security challenges facing Nigeria. Now, switching gears to a different kind of challenge, we have news regarding Arise TV owner Duka Obagbena.
Ah yes, a story of financial intrigue. According to Pulstock, a federal high court has frozen $225 million in assets linked to Obagbena and his oil and gas company General Hydrocarbons Limited.
This stems from a lawsuit filed by First Bank of Nigeria and FBN Quest trustees who are seeking to recover outstanding loan facilities that General Hydrocarbons allegedly defaulted on.
The court has issued what are known as Mareva injunctions. Essentially, these injunctions prevent major banks and digital platforms from releasing funds or facilitating transactions involving the defendants. They also target individual directors of General Hydrocarbons, restricting them from selling or transferring personal assets within Nigeria.
Wow, that's a pretty aggressive legal tactic. What are the broader implications of this case?
Well, for one, it highlights the increasing scrutiny of corporate debt defaults and the willingness of financial institutions to pursue strong legal action to recoup their losses.
It's shaping up to be a high-stakes battle, with potential repercussions for both the financial and media landscapes in Nigeria.
Without a doubt, market analysts are already observing the impact on FBN Holdings stock, which has experienced a decline. This case underscores the importance of corporate governance and financial oversight, especially in industries with significant influence.
It'll be interesting to see how this legal battle unfolds and what precedent it might set for future corporate debt disputes in Nigeria.
It's a reminder that no one is above the law, even powerful figures in media and business.
It definitely sends a strong message about accountability. So today we've explored a range of complex and interconnected issues, from corruption and budget padding in Nigeria to trade wars, sanctions, and military intervention on the global stage.
These stories offer a glimpse into the fragility of political systems, the intricate dynamics between nations, and the constant struggle to hold individuals and institutions accountable for their actions.
It's been a lot to take in, but I think it highlights the importance of staying informed and engaging in these crucial conversations. What do you think, based on everything we've discussed? What are some of the key takeaways for our listeners today?
I think it's important to remember that even seemingly distant events can have ripple effects that impact us all. Whether it's a trade war between two nations or a corruption scandal in a faraway country, these events shape the global landscape and influence our own lives in subtle but profound ways. It's also crucial to be critical consumers of information. We're bombarded with news from all directions, and it's easy to get caught up in the sensationalism. Take the time to consider different perspectives, question assumptions, and dig deeper to understand the complexities behind the headlines.
That's such an important point. And I think today's discussion has really demonstrated the power of connecting the dots. By looking at these seemingly disparate events together, we can start to see the bigger picture and understand the forces that are shaping our world.
Exactly. And ultimately, I hope this encourages our listeners to continue exploring these topics on their own. Don't just accept what you hear at face value. Ask questions, challenge conventional wisdom, and seek out diverse perspectives to form your own informed opinions.
Well said. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insights. It's been a truly enlightening conversation.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey through today's top news headlines. We encourage you to stay curious, stay engaged, and keep exploring the world around you. Thank you for listening to today's top news headlines on IAMC Radio and Podcast.